There is a wound that lives in the space between your heartbeat and your breath, where desire meets shame, where longing touches fear. It is the wound of 1,000 generations who were told that the body was separate from the soul. Tonight, we speak of the forgotten temple that lives within your flesh, the one that remembers what you have forgotten. You wake sometimes feeling like a stranger in your own skin, as if something essential was taken from you long before you learned to name it. The mirror shows you a face, but behind your eyes lives an exile, someone who once knew how to inhabit their body like a prayer, who understood that touch could be sacred. You carry the memory of touches that left you emptier than before they began, of intimacy that felt like performance, of desire that whispered promises but delivered only the echo of your own loneliness. There are those who move through the world carrying invisible bruises, not on their flesh, but on their soul's ability to trust that pleasure can exist without punishment. The ancestors who live in your bones remember when bodies were altars and union was ceremony. But that remembering has been buried beneath layers of cultural sediment, religious shame, and the collective forgetting of what it means to be both human and holy. This is not about healing your sexuality. This is about remembering that your sexuality was never broken. It was buried beneath layers of collective amnesia, waiting for you to excavate the sacred from the shame. What you're about to understand is this: every moment of sexual pain, every experience of disconnection, every time your body felt foreign to your spirit, these were not punishments, they were invitations. Invitations to remember that desire itself is your soul's way of reaching toward wholeness. She stood in the cathedral of her own body, but had been taught to see only ruins. Imagine walking through a sacred temple that has been systematically vandalized. The walls still pulse with the memory of reverence, but the surfaces have been covered with graffiti that reads shame, guilt, danger, control. The priests who should have taught you to worship there instead taught you to fear the fire that burns at the altar. For centuries, the institutions meant to guide us toward the sacred instead taught us to fear the very force that connects us to creation itself. They built walls between body and spirit, between pleasure and holiness, between desire and divinity. They told us that the fire in our pelvis was base, animal, separate from our higher selves. There was a woman who spent her whole life apologizing for taking up space in her own body. Every time she felt desire, she heard her grandmother's voice whispering warnings about women who wanted too much. She didn't know she was carrying the sexual shame of 7 generations in her womb. But what we repress in the light becomes shadow. What we deny in our conscious minds becomes the very force that controls us from the darkness. The culture that taught you to fear your sexuality also taught you to fear your power, your intuition, your connection to the creative force that births galaxies. The mystery schools knew something we have forgotten. Sexual energy is life force itself. When it flows freely, it becomes the fuel for artistic creation, spiritual awakening, and the magnetic presence that draws authentic love. When it's dammed up by shame, it becomes the source of compulsion, addiction, and the endless search for something outside ourselves to make us feel alive. He realized he had been giving pieces of his soul away for so long that he no longer remembered what it felt like to be whole. There comes a moment in every sexual journey when the accumulated weight of disconnection becomes unbearable. When you look in the mirror after another encounter that left you feeling hollow and realize you don't recognize the person staring back at you. When you understand that you've been using your body as currency, trading intimacy for approval, searching for love in places that only offer its shadow. This is the dark night of the sexual soul, when every pattern of giving your power away, every compromise of your boundaries, every time you said yes when your body was screaming no, converges into a moment of devastating clarity. She sat on the edge of her bed at 3 a.m., naked and shaking, not from cold, but from the recognition that she had been prostituting her own soul, not for money, but for the illusion of being wanted. She had confused being desired with being loved, being needed with being valued, being chosen with being cherished. This is the necessary destruction that precedes all authentic creation. The ego's version of sexuality, the performance, the strategy, the unconscious repetition of trauma, must die before the soul's version can be born. In the shamanic understanding, all initiation requires a form of death. The part of you that needed validation through sexual approval must be composted in order for the part of you that is inherently worthy to emerge. He touched her hand, and for a moment remembered he was made of starlight. In traditions that never forgot the sacred nature of embodied existence, sexual energy is understood as the same force that spins planets and grows forests. The Taoists call it Jing, fundamental life essence that, when cultivated rather than dissipated, becomes the fuel for spiritual awakening. The ancients knew it as the sleeping serpent of creative power, coiled at the base of the spine, waiting to rise through the energy centers of the body and unite individual consciousness with cosmic awareness. This is not metaphor. This is energetic reality. Every time you make love consciously, every moment of true intimate connection, you are literally alchemizing matter into spirit, transforming base desire into golden presence. There is a story from the Egyptian mysteries. When Isis gathered the scattered pieces of Osiris's body, the act of their reunion was not just resurrection, but the creation of a new form of consciousness, one that had experienced death and chose love anyway. This is what happens when sexual union becomes ceremony rather than conquest, when two people meet not from need, but from overflow, not to complete each other, but to create something together that neither could birth alone. The mystic poets knew this secret. The same longing that drives you toward another's body is the soul's yearning to remember its own divine nature. Sexual desire, at its deepest level, is spiritual homesickness. The individual drop remembering it belongs to the ocean. You know this ache, don't you? This sense that somewhere along the way you learn to perform intimacy rather than inhabit it, that your body became a stage for someone else's fantasy instead of a temple for your own awakening. You felt the hollow echo after encounters that should have been fulfilling. The way certain touches seem to reach right through your skin and remind you of every time someone treated your body as territory to conquer rather than sacred ground to reverence. Maybe you found yourself going through the motions of pleasure while some essential part of you watches from a distance, detached, protecting itself from full presence because presence has led to pain before. Maybe you've given so much of yourself away in the name of love that you've forgotten what your own desire actually feels like when it's not shaped by someone else's need. Or perhaps you've been the one doing the taking, using sexuality as a drug to numb the ache of your own unmet need for recognition, for power, for proof that you exist and matter in this vast universe. You are not broken for feeling this way. You are not damaged goods. You are a soul who was taught to fear the very force that could liberate you, and every moment of sexual disconnection has been your psyche's way of protecting you until you were ready to reclaim your power. Before you sleep tonight, I want you to try something. Light a candle, or if you have no candle, simply close your eyes and imagine a flame flickering in the center of your chest. This flame represents the sexual energy that belongs purely to you before anyone else ever touched you, before you learn to give it away for approval or take it for validation. Place your hand on your heart and speak these words either aloud or in the silence of your inner temple. I call back every piece of my sexual essence that I gave away unconsciously. I call back my power from every person who received it without reverence. I forgive myself for forgetting my own sacredness, and I choose now to remember. Breathe into that flame in your chest. Feel it growing brighter with each inhale, burning away the residue of every sexual encounter that left you feeling less than whole. This is not about blame or regret. This is about energetic archaeology, excavating your authentic desire from beneath the layers of conditioning, trauma, and unconscious giving away of your life force. Your sexuality belongs to you first, not to please, not to perform, not to prove anything to anyone. It belongs to you as a pathway back to your own aliveness, your own creative power, your own remembering of what it feels like to be fully present in the temple of your own flesh. She finally understood why some touches left her feeling expanded, while others left her feeling invaded. It was never about the touch itself, it was about the consciousness behind it. Here is what the modern world has forgotten. Sex is never just physical. Every sexual encounter is an exchange of energy fields, an interweaving of life force, a temporary merging of two electromagnetic signatures. In traditions that understand the subtle body, this is recognized as the blending of luminous energy fields that extend far beyond the boundaries of skin. When you make love with someone, you don't just exchange bodily fluids, you exchange emotional imprints, energetic patterns, sometimes even inherited trauma from their lineage. This is why you can feel drained after sex with someone whose energy doesn't align with yours. This is why some sexual encounters leave you feeling like you've touched the face of God, while others leave you feeling like you need a shower for your soul. I knew a man who could feel the sexual history of every woman he touched, not because he was psychic, but because he had learned to pay attention to the energy that moves between bodies. He could sense where she had been hurt, where she had closed down, where she still carried the imprint of lovers who had taken without giving. This sensitivity wasn't a burden. It was a gift that allowed him to approach intimacy as a form of healing rather than consumption. The ancient temples understood this. Before sexual union was permitted, there were purification rituals, energy-clearing practices, conscious intention setting. Sex was understood as a form of communion that required preparation, reverence, and the understanding that you were not just pleasuring a body, you were touching a soul. The day she stopped looking for her other half was the day she became whole. Deep in your psyche live two forces that the ancient alchemists called the sacred marriage, the inner masculine and the inner feminine. Not gender roles, but archetypal energies that exist within every human soul, regardless of the body they inhabit. Your inner masculine is the part of you that can penetrate through illusion to truth, that provides direction and focus, that protects what is sacred and says no to what is not aligned. Your inner feminine is the part that receives and transforms, that trusts the wisdom of cycles and seasons, that knows how to birth new realities from the dark, fertile void of the unknown. She had spent years seeking in romantic partners the very qualities she had rejected in herself. Every man she loved was teaching her about the masculine strength she had never learned to embody. Every man who hurt her reflected the ways she had abandoned her own inner feminine wisdom. When these inner forces are at war, when the masculine becomes tyrannical or the feminine becomes codependent, your external relationships become battlegrounds for unresolved inner conflicts. But when they unite within you, your sexuality becomes an expression of wholeness rather than an attempt to find completion through another. This inner marriage is not a concept to understand, but a reality to embody. It happens when you can hold both strength and softness, both giving and receiving, both protection and surrender. When you no longer need another person to provide what you're capable of generating within yourself. The wisdom traditions all teach practices for maintaining the integrity of your energy field, especially after intimate exchange. This is not paranoia. This is energy hygiene, as essential as washing your body after physical activity. In the Andean tradition, after any intense energetic exchange, practitioners sit in running water or visualize golden light flowing down through their crown, filling their entire being with their own essential energy. Then breathing out through the base of their spine, any energy that doesn't belong to their highest good. After intimacy, she would sit quietly and breathe golden light down through the top of her head, imagining it filling every cell of her body with her own pure essence. Then she would exhale through her tailbone, releasing into the earth any energy that felt foreign, heavy or misaligned with her truth. This practice taught her the difference between intimacy and invasion, between openness and porousness, between giving from overflow and giving from depletion. The Celtic mystic spoke of creating thin places, sacred boundaries that allow for connection while maintaining individual sovereignty. In your sexual life, this becomes the art of being intimate without losing yourself, open without being overwhelmed, generous without being depleted. You can touch another's soul without taking responsibility for their healing. You can receive love without becoming addicted to the giver. You can share your body without giving away your power. Personal sovereignty in sexuality means understanding that your body is your temple, your energy is your responsibility, and your choices shape not just your present pleasure, but your future capacity for authentic love. When you operate from sexual sovereignty, you attract experiences and people who match your level of consciousness rather than your level of wounding. You stop being a magnet for those who want to take from you and start drawing those who want to create with you. There's a law in physics called resonance. When one tuning fork is struck, another fork of the same frequency will begin to vibrate, even across a room. Your energy field works the same way. When you're vibrating at the frequency of wholeness, you attract others who are also whole. This might mean periods of conscious celibacy while you recalibrate your energy. It might mean ending sexual relationships that drain your vitality, even if they're familiar or comfortable. It might mean learning to receive pleasure without guilt and to give pleasure without losing yourself in the other's approval. Sexual sublimation, the conscious direction of sexual energy, rather than its unconscious dissipation, becomes a form of internal alchemy. When this life force is not scattered through unconscious encounters, it becomes available for creative expression, spiritual practice, and the kind of magnetic presence that draws truly aligned partnerships. She finally understood. Every sexual wound had been preparing her for a love so pure it could only be received by someone who had learned to love herself first. This is the profound truth that transforms victims into initiates. Your sexual pain was not punishment, it was preparation. Every experience of sexual disconnection, every moment of feeling used or empty or ashamed, every relationship that ended in heartbreak, these were not evidence of your unworthiness. They were your soul's way of teaching you discernment. Every person who treated your body carelessly was showing you how precious it truly is. Every moment of sexual emptiness was creating space for fullness. Every betrayal was teaching you the difference between love and its counterfeits. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." In the context of sexual healing, this means that every place you've been broken open sexually has become a doorway for deeper wisdom, greater compassion, and more authentic love. Sometimes we have to experience what love is not before we can recognize what love is. Sometimes we have to give our power away unconsciously before we can learn to share it consciously. Sometimes we have to feel completely fragmented before we understand what wholeness truly means. In shamanic understanding, all initiation involves a form of death and rebirth. The part of you that needed to be completed by another had to die so that the part of you that is already complete could emerge. She began to move through the world like someone who carried fire instead of wounds. Integration is not a destination, it's a daily practice. It's the choice to inhabit your body as a sacred vessel, to treat your sexual energy as creative life force, to approach intimacy as an opportunity for mutual awakening rather than mutual neediness. This might look like starting each day with practices that connect you to your body, breathing into your pelvis, moving your hips in circles, placing your hands on your heart, and remembering that you are both human and holy. It might mean approaching relationships as spiritual practice, asking not, "Can this person complete me?" but "Can we create something beautiful together?" The ancient Tao teaches, "The Master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. She is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. When you embody sexual wisdom, you become available to love in its highest form, while maintaining discernment about where and how you share your most intimate energy. You understand that every sexual choice is a spiritual choice, that every intimate encounter is an opportunity to practice presence, that every moment of physical connection is a chance to remember the divine nature of embodied love. You stop using sex as an escape from yourself and start using it as a pathway back to yourself. You stop seeking validation through your sexuality and start expressing your essence through it. In the end, she realized that everything, every touch, every heartbreak, every moment of pleasure and pain had been leading her home to herself. Your sexuality is not separate from your spirituality. It never was. The divide between body and soul, between pleasure and holiness, between desire and divinity, this was an artificial separation imposed by cultures that feared the power of sexually awakened, spiritually integrated human beings. When you reclaim your sexuality as a spiritual force, you reclaim your power as a creator, your capacity for deep intimacy, and your birthright to experience the divine through your own embodied existence. The temple of your body has always been sacred. You just needed to remember how to worship there. Every experience of sexual pain was preparing you for this moment of recognition that you are both the priest and the altar, both the seeker and the sought, both the lover and the beloved. Tonight, before you sleep, place your hand on your pelvis and make this commitment to yourself. I will no longer treat my body as separate from my spirit. I will no longer approach sexuality as disconnected from the sacred. I will honor this vessel that carries my soul, and I will share my intimate energy only with those who recognize the divine fire I carry. Your journey to sexual wholeness is your journey home to yourself, and when you arrive, you will understand that every step, even the most painful ones, was necessary to bring you to this moment of integration. The wound became the doorway. The exile became the path home. The pain became the wisdom. What you sought in another's touch was always waiting in the silence of your own sacred solitude. If this understanding resonates with the deepest part of your being, share this video with someone who might need to remember their own sacred nature. And in the comments, tell us, what would change in your life if you truly believed your body was a temple?